First contact with fear. Commander Reese Blackthorne stood at the viewing window of the Galactic Science Council's premier xenobiology research station, watching the skeptical faces of the alien scientists reflected in the reinforced glass. Behind them, through the window, stretched an endless vista of shimmering purple lakes that would have looked beautiful if not for the fact that they contained the most corrosive natural substance known to the galaxy. "You want me to what?" Blackthorne asked, keeping their voice steady despite the absurdity of the situation. The station's chief researcher, distinguished scientist Sixtel, clicked their mandibles in what Blackthorne had learned was their species' equivalent of clearing one's throat. "We merely wish to conduct some basic physiological scans," Sixtel said, their crystalline exoskeleton catching the light as they gestured with multiple appendages. "You understand, surely, that we must verify your species' claimed resilience. The readings we're getting simply cannot be accurate." Blackthorne suppressed a sigh. This was supposed to be a routine diplomatic visit, part of humanity's ongoing efforts to establish scientific cooperation with the Galactic Council. Instead, they'd walked into what felt like an intervention, with a dozen of the galaxy's most prestigious xenobiologists treating them like some sort of impossible biological anomaly. "The readings are accurate," Blackthorne said, turning away from the window to face the assembled scientists. "Human beings evolved on what you call a death world. Our biology reflects that." Research Assistant Phalanx, a floating gas-filled being contained within a protective membrane, drifted forward. Their translation device emitted a series of worried tones. "But Commander, according to our instruments, your internal temperature is nearly 37 degrees Celsius. You're generating enough heat to cook most proteins. Your blood literally contains dissolved metal. Your bones are laced with minerals that should be toxic. And somehow you're not only alive but functioning normally." Blackthorne had to admit it was almost amusing watching these brilliant minds grapple with human biology. They'd been on the station less than 6 hours, and already they'd caused 3 different scientists to require calming supplements just by existing. "Not to mention the oxygen," muttered senior researcher Thlar, their tentacles writhing in agitation. "They'd breathe oxidizer, voluntarily, for fuel. And their gravity tolerance," added another scientist, this one a crystalline being whose name Blackthorne hadn't caught. "No species should be able to function under such crushing forces without mechanical assistance." Blackthorne was about to respond when an alarm began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed as a computerized voice announced something in the dominant galactic language that their translator rendered as, "Warning, extreme environmental event imminent. All personnel to safety stations." The assembled scientists immediately scattered to their designated positions, leaving Blackthorne standing alone by the window. Through the reinforced glass, they could see why. A massive storm was rolling in across the purple lakes, bringing with it clouds of concentrated acid rain that would eat through most materials in seconds. "Commander," Sixtel called out, "please, you must come to the safety chamber immediately. Our protective barriers may not hold against this level of corrosive activity." But Blackthorne wasn't listening. They were too busy studying the readings on their personal diagnostic tool, standard issue for all human explorers. The storm wasn't just bringing acid rain, it was stirring up the lakes themselves, creating a unique mixture of compounds that, according to their readings, might have fascinating applications back on Earth. "Commander." Sixtel's voice had risen to what Blackthorne assumed was panic. "The barriers are already showing signs of stress. We must evacuate this section." "Actually," Blackthorne said, still studying their readings, "I think this might be exactly what we needed." They turned to face the horrified scientist. "You wanted proof of human resilience, of our biological capabilities. Well, what better way to demonstrate than with a practical example?" The look of incomprehension on Sixtel's face slowly transformed into one of horror as they realized what Blackthorne was suggesting. "You cannot be serious. The acid concentration alone would dissolve most metals in seconds. The temperature, the pressure, Perfect testing conditions, Blackthorn said with a smile that made several nearby scientists back away nervously. Sometimes the best way to prove something is through demonstration, wouldn't you agree? As the storm raged closer and the warning sirens grew louder, Blackthorn began removing their diplomatic uniform, revealing the standard-issue environment suit underneath. It wasn't rated for these conditions. Nothing was, but it would provide basic protection for their clothes at least. This is madness. Zixtal protested, their crystalline form vibrating with distress. I forbid it. As chief researcher of this facility, I cannot allow. With all due respect, distinguished scientist, Blackthorn interrupted, checking the seals on their suit. You don't have the authority to forbid me from doing anything. This is a diplomatic visit, remember. And I'm about to engage in some very hands-on diplomacy. The assembled scientists watched in horrified fascination as Blackthorn approached the airlock. Behind them, through the window, the acid storm had arrived in full force, turning the sky into a churning mass of purple-black clouds that occasionally lit up with chemical reactions. Besides, Blackthorn added, unable to resist a final comment as they prepared to step into the airlock. I've always wondered what it would feel like to swim in the most corrosive substance in the galaxy. Consider this a contribution to your research database. As the airlock began its cycling sequence, Blackthorn could hear the chaos erupting behind them. Scientists shouting, equipment being hastily activated, and above it all, Zixtal's voice ordering everyone to their observation stations. After all, if a human was going to attempt something this unprecedented, they were damn well going to document it properly. The outer door opened, and Blackthorn faced the storm, their smile widening as they took their first step toward what would soon become one of the most infamous demonstrations of human capability in galactic scientific history. The challenge. The observation deck of Station Zenith 9 had never been so crowded. Every available scientist, researcher, and support staff member pressed against the reinforced windows, their various biological forms creating a rainbow of colors as they jostled for position. The acid storm raged outside, but all eyes were fixed on the lone figure now standing at the edge of the largest purple lake. Initiating full-spectrum biological monitoring, Research Assistant Verlinks announced, their gaseous forms swirling with anxiety. Though I protest that we're about to watch a diplomatic incident turn into a tragedy. Distinguished Scientist Zixtal's crystalline form trembled as they activated the station's highest-grade recording equipment. Commander Blackthorn, they broadcast through the external communications array. This is your final warning. The acid concentration has reached -14 pH. Even our most resilient sampling equipment dissolves within minutes. Through the comm system, Blackthorn's laugh echoed across the observation deck, causing several junior researchers to flinch. Distinguished scientist, you might want to recalibrate your understanding of warning. Where I come from, this is what we call interesting data. Senior researcher Thlar's tentacles wrapped nervously around their monitoring station. They can't be serious. This must be some form of human psychological warfare. Negative, Verlinks responded, monitoring Blackthorn's biosigns. Heart rate elevated but within normal parameters. Endocrine levels consistent with excitement. They're actually enjoying this. Outside, Blackthorn had reached the lake's edge. The acid storm whipped around them, each droplet leaving slight scorch marks on their environment suit. They knelt down, producing a small device from their kit. For the record, Blackthorn's voice came through clearly despite the storm. I'm about to collect some samples before the main demonstration. Our geological survey team back on Earth will be very interested in the mineral formation processes under these conditions. Main demonstration. Zixtal's translator almost glitched on the words. You mean there's more than just standing in an acid storm? Blackthorn's response was to activate their suit's recording systems and, to the horror of every being watching, reach down to touch the lake's surface with their gloved hand. The protective material sizzled but held. Fascinating, Blackthorn muttered, clearly more interested in the readings than their own safety. The interaction between the acid and the local minerals creates a sort of catalytic reaction. No wonder the lakes maintain such extreme pH levels. The scientific team watched in morbid fascination as Blackthorn collected several samples, carefully storing them in specially designed containers. But it was what came next that would be talked about in scientific circles for decades to come. Now then, Blackthorn announced, standing up straight, about that demonstration of human resilience you requested. Commander, Zixtol's voice had taken on a pleading tone. Whatever you're thinking. Too late for thinking, Blackthorn interrupted cheerfully. Time for doing. With deliberate movements, they began deactivating their environment suit's protective systems. Multiple alarms went off simultaneously in the observation deck. They're depressurizing their suit, Vrillix announced unnecessarily, their gaseous form swirling in patterns that indicated extreme distress. External protection will be minimal in 10 seconds. Stop this, Zixtol demanded. This is beyond reckless. It's science. Blackthorn finished for them, as the last seal on their suit hissed open. Sometimes the only way to prove something is to demonstrate it directly. You wanted to understand human capabilities. Well, pay attention. The assembled scientists watched in horror as Blackthorn stepped out of their environment suit, now wearing only what they had explained earlier was standard issue testing gear. A reinforced swimsuit designed for extreme conditions, but nothing that should theoretically protect against what they were about to attempt. Initial skin contact in 3, 2. Vrillix's countdown was interrupted by a collective gasp as Blackthorn didn't just touch the acid lake. They dove in. The surface of the purple liquid broke with a splash that sent droplets flying, each one leaving small burn marks on the nearby rocks. For a moment, everything was still except for the ripples spreading across the lake's surface. Life signs, Thalar demanded, their tentacles flying over the monitoring equipment. Are they stable? Vrillix reported in disbelief. All biological functions within normal parameters. They're swimming. Indeed, Blackthorn had surfaced in the middle of the lake, moving through the corrosive liquid with powerful strokes. Their voice came through the comm system, slightly strained but clear. Water temperature approximately 85 degrees Celsius. Significant mineral content creating increased buoyancy. Mild tingling sensation on exposed skin, nothing beyond tolerance levels. The scientific team watched in stunned silence as Blackthorn began methodically testing different swimming strokes, occasionally stopping to take measurements or collect samples. They moved through the acid with the casual confidence of someone who had absolutely no business being alive under those conditions. This is impossible, Zixtol whispered, their crystalline form reflecting the purple light from the lake in chaotic patterns. The readings must be wrong. The equipment must be malfunctioning. No carbon-based life form could. Oh, it gets better, Blackthorn called out, having apparently heard them. Watch this. They took a deep breath and disappeared beneath the surface. Submersion, Vrillix announced, their usual professional tone cracking. Complete submersion in acid with fade levels that shouldn't even exist in nature. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. The scientists held their breath, those who had breath to hold. Then 40 seconds. A minute. How long can humans hold their breath? Someone asked nervously. According to their medical files, Thalar consulted their database. Several minutes under normal conditions. But these are not normal conditions. At the 2-minute mark, Blackthorn surfaced again, holding something in their hands. Found it, they announced triumphantly. Thought I saw some interesting crystal formations down there. Your mineral analysis team is going to love this. As Blackthorn began making their way back to shore, Zixtol turned to their assembled team. I want every piece of data from the last 10 minutes analyzed. Every reading, every measurement, every fluctuation in their vital signs. If we can't understand how they survived this, we don't deserve to call ourselves scientists. Behind them, Blackthorn emerged from the acid lake, their skin slightly reddened but otherwise unharmed, carrying samples that would rewrite several textbooks on xenobiology. But more importantly, they had just demonstrated something that would change the galaxy's perception of humanity forever. The age of underestimating humans was officially over. Preparations and panic. The next 12 hours on Station Zenith 9 were pure chaos, but of a distinctly scientific variety. Every laboratory, every analysis chamber, and every diagnostic device was running at full capacity. Commander Blackthorn sat calmly in the medical bay, surrounded by increasingly frustrated xenobiologists. "Your epidermis should have dissolved," Senior Medical Officer Prelf stated, their bioluminescent appendages flashing with agitation. "Yet it shows only mild irritation equivalent to a sunburn." "Pretty much," Blackthorn confirmed, watching with amusement as 3 different scanning devices whirred around their head. "Though I've had worse sunburns from a day at the beach." "But the acid," Prelf began, "is certainly impressive," Blackthorn interrupted. "But you're forgetting something fundamental about human biology. We're built to adapt. Our skin is constantly regenerating. Our bodies naturally neutralize a wide range of harmful substances, and we've evolved to handle extreme conditions." In the main laboratory, distinguished scientist Zixtal was leading a team through the analysis of Blackthorn's collected samples. Their crystalline form had developed several new facets from stress, something their species did only under extreme duress. The mineral formations they retrieved, Zixtal announced to the gathered researchers, show signs of biological activity, life, adapting to exist in conditions we deemed impossible. Just like humans, research assistant Verlinks finished, their gaseous forms swirling thoughtfully. "Perhaps we've been approaching this all wrong. Instead of asking how humans survive these conditions, we should be asking why we assumed they couldn't." Paradigm shift. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Science Council's Executive Committee was called to order. Holographic representatives from 27 different species flickered around the conference table, all focused on the data streaming in from Station Zenith 9. "The implications are significant," Council President Hurixtel stated, their quantum state body fluctuating between patterns of uncertainty. "If humans can survive direct exposure to what we classified as Class X hazardous environments, then our entire classification system needs revision," Zixtal finished. They had been summoned to present their findings, along with Commander Blackthorn, who sat looking remarkably composed for someone who had just appended galactic scientific understanding. "Not just your classification system," Blackthorn added. "Your whole approach to environmental adaptation needs rethinking. Those acid lakes, we've already identified potential applications in industrial processes, waste management, and even medical treatment." Medical treatment. Several counselors exclaimed simultaneously. Under controlled conditions, certain mineral compounds in the lakes show promising applications for treating various ailments. "We've been studying similar principles in Earth's hot springs for centuries." The council chamber erupted in overlapping discussions, theories, and exclamations. Through it all, Blackthorn caught Zixtal's eye and offered a small smile. The scientist's crystalline form shimmered in what might have been amusement. A new understanding. 1 month later, Station Zenith 9 had been transformed. New research wings extended from the main structure, staffed by a mix of galactic scientists and human researchers. The purple acid lakes, once viewed with fear and revulsion, were now the site of groundbreaking studies in extremophile biology and adaptive evolution. Commander Blackthorn stood at the same window where their adventure had begun, but this time they weren't alone. Besides them, Zixtal and Verlinks watched a team of human researchers, properly equipped but notably relaxed, collecting samples from the lake's edge. "I still flinch every time they get close to the surface," Verlinks admitted, their gaseous form creating patterns that indicated both worry and fascination. "That's understandable," Blackthorn replied. "Change takes time. But look at what we've already accomplished in just a month. 3 new species of extremophile organisms identified. 2 patent-pending medical treatments based on the lake's mineral compounds. And most importantly, they gestured to where a human researcher was explaining something to a group of alien scientists, all of them engaged in animated discussion. Most importantly, Zixtal finished, "We're learning to question our assumptions about environments, about biology, and about each other." "Exactly," Blackthorn nodded. "Though I have to admit, I'm a little disappointed about one thing." Both aliens turned to them curiously. "Well," Blackthorn grinned, "I was hoping to start a trend. But so far, I'm still the only one who's gone swimming." The sound of Zixtal's crystalline laughter mixing with Vrlinx's gaseous chimes echoed through the station, a harmony of different species united in scientific pursuit. Outside, the purple lakes shimmered under the alien sun, no longer a barrier to understanding, but a bridge to new discoveries. In the years that followed, Station Zenith 9 would become famous throughout the galaxy, not just for its groundbreaking research, but as the place where humanity proved that sometimes the most remarkable discoveries come from being willing to dive into the unknown. Quite literally, in this case. And if subsequent human visitors occasionally suggested recreational acid lake diving as team-building exercises, well, that was just another example of the species' unique approach to galaxy-wide cooperation. The end.